Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to tonight's webinar. This is a Datacolor webinar in cooperation with WEX, and the title of tonight's webinar is Adobe Photoshop Lightroom and Adobe Photoshop Tips and Tricks with Creative Cloud and Datacolor. I'm Boris Bergman from Datacolor, and I'd like to welcome you to this webinar. With me tonight, it's Richard Curtis from Adobe and Richard West from Datacolor. Hello, Richard. Hello, Richard. How are you doing?
Hi, Boris. Good, thank you.
Yeah, Hi, Boris. Hi, guys.
Okay, great. And as I'm just the host tonight, I will hand you over now to Richard Curtis, and we will have about 1 hour approximately, and after that presentation from Richard Curtis and Richard West, we will go into a chat where you have the possibility to enter all the questions you have. We will record this webinar, and it will be placed on the website to be watched again, let's say tomorrow afternoon, maybe on Friday. Okay, so what I will do now, I will hand you over to Richard Curtis now. Please, Richard, share your screen with us. You have now the ability to do so. Great.
Right. Hi, guys. It's great to talk to you this evening on a beautiful day outside. Unfortunately, we're stuck inside, but it's the opportunity to learn about new things inside Lightroom, and especially around Lightroom Creative Cloud update that we made last week. So as Boris said, my name is Richard Curtis. I work for Adobe here in the UK, and my primary role is around digital imaging, but I also look after 3D and 3D printing in Photoshop for Adobe here in EMEA. So if any of you folks are looking to get into the world of 3D printing and 3D in Photoshop, then drop me a mail later or find me on Twitter. Anyway, so what I thought I'd do as part of this session is not just cover the new CC update for Lightroom and what comes with that, but also wanted to cover some kind of older stuff as well, I think, that's really relevant to photography and to photographers and digital imaging in its wider form. And that is really to go through Lightroom 4 and Lightroom 5 and just go through a few features there, because there is some great things in there. And if you are new to photography or looking to make your photography even better, there's some great tools in there. It also gives me an opportunity to actually show you some quick tips and tricks on how to make your photographs look even better without really working too hard in post-production. And really, for me, that's the end goal, is to get my pictures edited and done and completed very quickly, so I can publish them to my website, in this case Behance. It enables me to go out and shoot more content and get more and get better at my craft, and actually create more content on my portfolio for people to view. Okay, so this is going back quite a few years now, but it's still a really valuable valuable feature that we put into Lightroom 4, and that's the shadow and highlight sliders. So I'm just going to move this picture that you see here into the development mode to give you a view on what's going on here. Now you can see with this picture, it's obviously the Eiffel Tower, but you can see here that it's pretty flat. But if we analyze the histogram on the right hand side in here, the histogram is telling us where the tones of the image lie and where the colors lie in the image. And you can see there, or in fact if I press the J key to turn on the highlight and shadow clipping indicators, you can see there that actually we're not clipping any of the highlights, we're only clipping a bit of the black. And that's okay. It means actually that the exposure isn't too bad. It's got everything in the tonal range of that picture actually in the picture itself. However, it looks flat because everything's kind of compressed. So to pull that out, we can use these two sliders. I actually use the base sliders in the basic panel to enable us to do that. Now, the organization of Lightroom is thus that you can start off at the top through the basic panel and then go down through each other panel to work on your pictures. Now, ultimately, Lightroom, or both Lightroom and Photoshop, are image enhancement tools in its kind of basic form, where Photoshop has the ability to be able to do composites as well. But Lightroom as an entity is just really around making very simple adjustments to your pictures, and the idea being that you should try and get your photograph right in the camera. So for me, if there's something not right in my picture that I can't fix within 5 or 10 minutes, it means I didn't do a very good job on the camera, so it means I have to go back and either shoot it again or get rid of it and put up with the fact that I don't have it. And then sometimes that's okay, because it means that I can actually, you know, focus on the pictures that I really want to show, not on the pictures that I just think I want to show. Okay, so let's look at this. We've obviously got a few things we can set up. First of all, we've got the white balance, which I'm sure that everybody knows how to set up. But the white balance can be chosen from a list. It comes in from the camera as shot, and all this data comes in from the camera automatically. But I can also move that around and move the little white balance picker around, so I can pick up the white balance manually and set that to where it needs to be. Now, if you're using something like a spider checker, which Richard will talk about later, and I'm using grey cards, which is always advisable if you're shooting in really weird conditions, I can actually use this to pick up the grey card setting from the first shot and then use that for every other shot that I've taken in that shoot, which is really, really handy to have. And I sometimes do that myself when the conditions are a bit weird. Although sometimes I do use the grass and use the sky, because that gives me a good grey balance as well. Now, let's get on to these sliders. I don't need to change the exposure much, because actually the exposure is pretty good. We're right at the end. You can see here, we're right on the edge of where the histogram is. I'm going to clip the highlights. So moving the exposure to the right won't really help. Moving it backwards, which would just put my shadows in the black, so that's going to be no good to me either. So the highlights and shadow sliders are great to open up the tonal range of the image. This is almost like HDR on a single image. So it means that I can open up my highlights and just open up all my highlight values. And you should be able to see there, I get now more shape to the sky, which is going to help me show this image off to the viewer. Now, the real great slider for me is always the shadow slider. And the shadow slider enables you to pull out all that detail in the shadows. Now, for me, these two sliders are absolutely belt and braces. Every single picture goes through these two sliders, because it just means that you're going to stretch the histogram out right, and you're going to get all that tonal information. Because then what you're going to do is you're going to work out where your shadows need to be, so you're showing more information about the picture. And then you're going to clip the whites to the point where the red comes in. Now, the red is showing because I've turned on the J key, or I've turned on the clipping indicators that are indicated here at the top of the histogram. So I want to clip the whites just to the point, but I can obviously, for creative effect, pull that back as well to give me more interest in the sky. Now the blacks, you know, I'm very similar to Don McCullen, who will clip the blacks quite heavily. So my blacks clip quite early. So you can see there that everything in black is clipping, and if I take off the J key, you will see that I've clipped quite hard to the blacks, and what that's going to do is it's going to give me loads of contrast. I can obviously boost the contrast by using a contrast slider, and that's something that I might think about doing, just to add that little bit of touch into the contrast areas. But what I will always do is add some clarity, and clarity adds mid-tone contrast. So if I just boost the clarity up, you'll see there I get a real punch, and the image just comes out of the page almost three-dimensional, which enables me to really kind of get the viewer to really think about my picture and start following those leading lines that I have inside the picture. Now we've only just changed 6 components of this image, so it took less than a minute to do this in the edit, and look at the difference that we made if we go to the before and after view. Huge difference there. So you can see that by just using a couple of sliders, as long as you get the picture right in the camera and make sure that all the tones are there and you're not clipping any highlights, then you can actually make amazing pictures very, very quickly. And for me, that's almost good to go. I might want to put a crop in, because I think at the minute it's a bit weak. So what I might do is just pull a crop in. I'm going to keep the original aspect ratio, although I could choose different ones to my liking. And I can also lock that aspect ratio in, which means that I'm not going to freeform the crop. And all I'm going to do is just pull the crop down and get to a point where I think that potentially is a stronger image. A stronger image means that you're filling the frame, you're putting things on maybe thirds, or you're putting things on golden spirals and this type of thing. By the way, if you want to look at that and not sure what I'm talking about, this is the grid on the crop. So if I go to the view and go to tools, crop guide overlay, you can see now the grid is on. If I go to the thirds, it will then change so that thirds are on. The idea being, and one rule that you can break, is that strong items should be on the rule of thirds, either on each of these contact points or one even, and that gives you strength to the image. Personally, I like using the golden spiral. It's more natural, and of course I can move that around in a very quick way just by cycling the orientation. Shift and O will do that for me, and I can move that around. So for me, I want to get that about there. So actually, you can see the arc is coming through the picture, and I'm actually using those points to put elements of the picture on, so to compose it in my composition. So for me, that's good. I might want to move it a little bit, and I can freeform move that to where I think it fits. I'm going to put the Eiffel Tower top, right on the top of that spiral there, which gives me good impact. So I know that that actually is a really strong image, and the viewer will see that, and they will probably enjoy that, looking at that picture. Okay, I'm going to talk about a real life scenario about colour, and Richard's going to go into much more detail a little bit later on. But colour to photographers is really important, super important. So, you know, all screens should really be calibrated to the ICC profile, which means that when you're working with colours, you're working with the correct colours on the screen and not working with colours that might be off the ICC profile, which just means that when you're making adjustments, that the colours are right. And it's really important when you print. So if you are getting colour shifts on print, it might be the fact that you're not colour calibrated properly. Now, this was taken with one of my cameras, and I've profiled the camera using the Spider Checker 24. So it gives me that kind of colour system, which Richard will talk about later on. But the reason I'm showing it here is because this is a real-world image that I might use as part of my portfolio, because I do like this kind of blue, the blue marks on this wood. That this is the profile that, when Richard talks about later, will be created. And if I click on this profile now and apply it to the picture, look at what happens to the purple and the blue. Wow. So it completely changed the purple and the blue because they're quite high frequency. So it's going to dial them back down again to the correct blue that was taken on the day. Okay. So this is where having a color calibrated camera and lens as well as a color calibrated screen comes into its own. Okay. So I'll just show that again. Just going to run backwards and then click on that profile, and you can see it change. Quite dramatic. So I always make sure that all my stuff is color calibrated. It just means that the color is going to be right pretty much every time. Okay, one of the things that came in Lightroom 5 is really handy is the advanced helium brush, and I'm actually going to use it on another image actually, just to save a bit of time, because I know we're quite short of time today. I'm going to use it on a different image. I'm going to use it on this image here. And what I'm going to do is just show you how to make this image look even better from what it was in the camera. So to do that, we need to analyze the image and say, you know, what points do we want the viewer to focus on? So if you analyze people like Ansel Adams, and he talked about the print, he would talk about if you're working with weak images, the viewer's eye could fall out of the screen, i.e. the viewer would come into the picture, and in my mind it comes in the bottom left, comes up to the tree, it sees the tree, it likes that because it's quite limbic. So remember, my brain's looking for very limbic items, in this case bright. It doesn't like dark, so it's going to be repelled from dark. So it's looking for bright areas. Okay, so we see some bright areas over here. It also sees some bright areas down here as well, which are little pieces of white in the grass, which might distract the viewer, so I need to fix those later on. But what Ansel talked about was a weak image can lead a viewer to actually come up here and fall out of the frame and go to the next picture. And the whole idea of this is to get your viewer to stay in your picture, in your frame, because that's the most important thing to view on. So let's fix this, and we'll show you a couple of new features inside Lightroom CC that really helps us do that. So let's move this to the development module. Now these are real live images, they're real live raw files, they're not small JPEGs. I did shoot this myself, so I kind of, I have this in a frame actually upstairs, so I did print it because I do like the image itself. Now the first thing we need to do is look at what things we need to change on this image. Remember, Lightroom's a toolbox for working with pictures. So look at my exposure and just check it, and you can see there that I can actually push the exposure up by 1/3 of a stop. Okay. Now I'll lose a little bit of the highlights, but I'm going to pull that back in a second using the highlights slider. So the highlight slider, as we showed before, enables me to pull data back into the highlights, and shadow enables me to pull tonal range out in the shadows to give me a much more balanced composition of picture, enables me to work on my picture in a better way. Now the picture looks completely different. Again, go to my whites and my black slider and set those white points and black points up to give me more contrast and add some more clarity. It doesn't really matter what order I do these in, because I'm going to, using Lightroom's non-destructive editing process, it means I can go in and make changes whenever I like, and I'm not having an impact on on anything in that process. So I can sharpen at this point if I wanted to do as well, and that's okay. And I can make adjustments after I've sharpened because it's all non-destructive. We're not going to damage any pixels. Okay, so this is okay still, but I still have an issue with the clouds and also with the edges, and also there's some white flecks on the screen as well. So to get on the white flecks, I'm just going to zoom in here. I'm going to zoom 1 to 1, and you can see I've got some branches and a little bit of cotton. I'm going to go to the healing brush, and in healing brush it's worthwhile noticing that we have visualized spots. And visualized spots can be used to actually dial in and show us any areas that we have, or any issues that we have in the picture. This is great for analyzing dust spots and things like that. So if you're printing and got dust spots in your image, it's definitely worthwhile looking at this and see if you have any issues with any dust spots. A quick glance over here, see what's going on. You can see some funniness over here that I might want to check out, and you might see some of the dust spots coming in because my sensors are pretty messy. In fact, there's one here that you can see, and I can fix that very quickly and get rid of that mark so I'm not being incummed later on when I go to print. Now, I'm going to change the size of my clone heal brush and just use the disc to actually reposition the area that I want to fix. I'm going to use that area nearby. I'm going to turn off visualize spots, and you can see there that the image has been corrected from that issue. I also have the tool overlay set to auto, which means that when I move out of the development module into the side panel, it removes the tools away from the screen so I can see what's going on. Now I think the feather is a bit too hard, so I can dial it down and soften it by dialing down, or dialing up, sorry, the feather, which will blend that in quite nicely. So that's one way of using a clone heal tool. The other one is by using the advanced healing tool, which is in Lightroom 5, and that enables me to draw a mask over the area that I'd like to clone, and then I can use that masked area to fix the image. And again, I can work on my feathering to blend that in, and you can see there that it does a pretty good job in fixing it up for me. So now, if I was editing for real, I would get rid of all this white area as well, because that could detract from the viewer. And also, there's a few spots here, and again, I can just use my circular clone heal tool just to get rid of elements, and I'm not going to be too careful about it, but I would do if I was normal. I will probably even, to be honest, get rid of this type of thing as well, because I know the viewer might see that and they might grab onto it later with their eyes, because their eyes are looking for limbic things. So I might want to get rid of that as well. I'd do a better job if I was doing it for real. And press done. That's pretty much my edit done from a point of view of clone healing, get rid of things that I don't want. And now what I want to work on is the sky. So for the sky, I'm going to use the gradient filter. Typically, gradient filter is used to hold light back in the camera on the lens, but the radial filter and the radiant filter inside Lightroom enables me to actually make adjustments on any effect inside Lightroom. So be that exposure or clarity or whatever it may be in my panel, and you can find that here in the effect. Any of these I can modify and manage. So I'm just going to pull this down. A grad is normally a straight filter that I can then move to the side and move off center a little bit. And the idea here is I'm going to dial exposure down and just dial it to a point where I think the sky was pretty moody on that day. It was about to rain. And I want the viewer to experience the same thing as I experienced, which was it's going to rain, we're going to get very wet, we better either make it home or better use some waterproof gear to do that. So you can see there what happens when I turn the overlay on, and the overlay is the mask that this is creating for me. You can see that actually it goes into the mountains, and I really don't want that to happen because I want to darken the mountains down. I want to blend that gradient filter into the sky, into the mountains, so there's no seam. And at the moment, you can kind of see a seam of exposure change. So for that, I'm going to use the brush. The new brush feature in Lightroom CC and in Lightroom 6, which is a perpetual license, enables me to take the brush value, and I can then use the Alt key to go to minus or plus by default, and then I can set my exposure to be 0 for the brush, and what I can now do is paint in the areas that I don't want the overlay of the gradient filter to cover. Now notice it's taking me a little bit of time to paint that away, and that's because of my that's because of my flow on the minus sign. So the flow is controlling how much of the mask I'm removing at any point in time. So 100% is all of it, and 1% is 1% each time, which means I'm going to have to paint on 100 times on one spot to get to 100%. So I want to keep that fairly controlled. That's why I'm using 2/3 of a stop, 6.5, and you can see now I can paint in the areas that I don't want this mask to cover, which gives me much more control, and I can go in and shift and make sure that I'm not impacting on any part of the image that I don't want that exposure to be part of. And I can reset that mask and double check the exposure by turning off the mask overlay and just dialing down and seeing what happens. And you can see there, I can really adjust it, and it's not really affecting the mountain as such, so I get a much more balanced picture. The last thing I want to do is actually control the viewer, and I want to do two things. Firstly, I want to make an area really bright so they can see it and they spot that and they go to that immediately. And that area I'm going to use is the dark. So I'm going to use the adjustment brush. The adjustment brush is used to paint areas in of interest. So for here, I'm going to paint in the exposure, not the tint. I'm going to paint the exposure in, and it's going to be about one stop more, again controlled by the flow and the density. I'm just going to increase the size of my brush and paint in this area here so it's a bit brighter than the original value. Now what happens is my eye, because it's looking for limbic things, it tries to find things of brightness. It sees this is bright and it latches onto here, and this is what it sees. Then it starts to sprawl out of the image. Now if you're working with still a very weak image, you can then use the effects panel to dial in a vignette and just darken the edges. This was used back in the 50s to really focus a viewer on the picture and stop you falling out of the frame. Again, your eyes are trying to find limbic things. It looks for the branch, it finds that it's limbic. It tries to find other things, gets to the edges, because it will do because of this branch over here, gets to the edges, then we'll push back in again because it's nice and dark. Let's look at the previous version compared to what we had now. And the previous one was something I changed earlier, so don't worry about that. That's just, sometimes that's what happens. But it was pretty flat, the original image. So we can actually do that very quickly by going backwards, and you can see there's my original image, and then I can just redo that through the history. I can redo that there. So you can see there's my previous, and there's my new image. So you see it didn't take very long, 5 minutes, and I'm done, ready to go on to the next picture. Okay, so the upright tool is a really great tool for fixing images that have this kind of wonky horizon and wonky distorted images that you might get when you're on the floor or when you're not really quite in the camera with a spirit level and all that kind of stuff. So there's a couple of things that are really worthwhile pointing out, and one is lens corrections. We work very closely with the lens profile with lens companies, people like Canon and Nikon and Hasselblad and Leica, because sometimes their lenses have natural vignetting in the lens, depends on what sort of lens it is. And what we can do is we profile those lenses with the bodies, and we make sure that we can fix any natural vignetting or any barrel distortion from those lenses. Now the way we do that is by using the enable profile corrections. This allows me to apply a profile automatically if it finds that profile for that camera lens combination. And when I click the button, watch what happens to the picture. You see the change? It's very subtle, but it just means that I flatten the image out and get it ready for working. Now, this isn't important for the next step, but it's always worthwhile making sure that you have profile corrections turned on, because it just means that you're going to get rid of any distortion or any vignetting. You can always put vignetting back in again, but it just gives you that kind of base look that you kind of want to start working with. And then the auto is going to just basically correct that picture for me, and it's going to correct the horizontals to correct the verticals. You also have other options as well. You can set the level and the vertical independently of each other, so you can control that where you want it to be. Now this will do an automatic crop, but you can actually remove that just by going through level or through vertical. Of course, you may get something a little bit more exaggerated like this, where you have everything's wonky, but you've also got these converging verticals. And for that, I can enable profile correction, but actually I need to do a full, and the full will perform a full 3D warp of this picture to correct it. So it is going to move pixels around, so use it sparingly. But the idea is that I can press the full, and it will give me a pretty good way of fixing that picture straight up. If I need to manually correct it, I can then go into the vertical and just shift it vertical and make sure it's all lined up to where it needs to be. and then I'm pretty good to go. So I can keep working on my pictures. The whole idea of Lightroom is A, it's non-destructive, but B, it's ultra fast. It gives you access to get to your edited content very, very quickly, but also safely. The radial filter is a great filter to have, and for me, this is kind of a real big saver when it comes down to working with images like this, and this is useful for portraits as well. So imagine the scenario where you look at this picture and you see the cowboys and you wonder what the story is, and your eye immediately goes over to the bright spot over here because it's limbic, and it looks at that and says, oh, I like the shiny brightness over there, I'm going to focus on that bit. But you kind of miss the point of the picture because the picture's all about the cowboys. Now, we could use a post-crop vignette, and a post-crop vignette will do a really good job in pulling in a dark area around the edges, and that will keep us in the frame. But in this instance, it won't actually keep us to the cowboys because we've still got this bright area in the picture over here. Because the post-crop vignette cannot be altered from its center point outwards, you haven't got control of where you put it. So if I go backwards, I'm going to use the radial filter now, and the radial filter can be used to actually make adjustments anywhere on that radial. You'll see that it goes darker in the cowboys and brighter elsewhere. That's because my exposure is set to 1.24. If I dial 1.24 down and exposure slide down to the dark areas, you will see now that we change the picture so that the cowboys are now the center point of the picture, and you don't get pulled into that light area over here because you've dialed the exposure down. So a real simple trick to get your viewer to looking at your picture and exactly the point you want them to look at and the story you want to take away from your picture. Okay, so that's the radial filter. It's amazing on portraits as well, and it can potentially save you so much time where previously you'd use grads to do it and this type of thing and painting with a brush. This will give you a really even control over your images and get you looking really amazing very, very, very quickly. Okay, so in Lightroom 6 and Lightroom CC, we've already seen we've got the filter brush, which is really handy. That can also be used, by the way, on the radial filter. We also know that photographers like shooting HDR, so we previously had a way to create HDR using Photoshop and using 32-bit TIFFs. But actually, we feel photographers need a faster way of doing this and in line with the Lightroom workflow. So what we've done now is we've put Lightroom automatic HDR building inside the Lightroom container. If I select these three images, you can see, if I just show them in survey mode, you can see that one is actually the meter point, one is one stop under, and one is one stop over. And what you'll find with this HDR in Lightroom is that you might not need to shoot 5 and 7 frames. You might be able to get away with 3, maybe even 2. Okay, so it's something to think about when you're shooting, and that's really important when you've got things like clouds that are moving and any foliage that is moving as well. If I right-click on these three pictures and go to Photo Merge, I now have HDR. Now HDR stands for High Dynamic Range, and what it's going to do is it will bring these three pictures into one picture and give me access to all the tonal range across that whole picture from was brought in from the other pictures, which means that I can actually get that picture back as a single image down to what I shot it on the day. And what Lightroom will do is, because it's working in 32-bit, it means that I'm able to put more content in than I could do with the normal 16-bit, so I don't have to commit early and make this really kind of oversaturated HDR images. I get a really natural look and feel. So HDR, if I just push it, we'll just go into the HDR preview module and bring those files in. Like I say, these are real-world files. They're not little JPEGs. They're proper files. It will create me about a 200 meg file. Now, the difference between Lightroom and Photoshop is that Photoshop would focus on a 32-bit TIFF. In Lightroom, we create a 32-bit RAW file. That's right, a DNG RAW file. So it contains all that raw data from those three pictures but blended together, which means that you really are working non-destructively on your raw elements. You can see that's done a really good job. It's actually got an auto tone. If I turn that off, it will then just give me the basic metered version. Auto tone will build me a preview. And what it's doing behind the scenes is it's moving the sliders in the development module to get me to the right point. If I say merge now, it runs that in background, enabling me to carry on my work as I go forward. And what it will do is it will create me that raw DNG file. Notice the DNG file at the bottom. It will create me that by default. Now I can go in and I can just go into my basic panel and work on my highlights and shadows and dial it back to where it needs to be, and then put some clarity in to give it a boost, and now it looks almost three-dimensional as it comes to the screen. So then I'm good to go and I can print it. But notice it's not overdone, and it's automatically managed any multiple occurring, or anything that doesn't occur for multiple frames, like movement of trees and stuff like that. And that's selectable inside the feature. The other thing, of course, with photographers is that they like to create panoramics. And here I have a set of files that I shot in the Cumbamella last year, and this is showing the whole kind of landscape of the Cumbamella. It's showing the pilgrims, it's showing the tents, it's showing the water, everything about it, and I really like it. So I want to pull this into panoramic, and previously you had to go into Photoshop to do it, but actually now I can go into Panorama in Lightroom, and exactly the same as in HDR, it will go and pull those pictures together and create me a single base picture based upon the way the photographs were taken and any symmetry that you have with those pictures. And it can also automatically select the projection, or if you are doing it manually, you want to pick cylindrical or spherical for a normal landscape. If you get any buildings in there with any perspective distortion, you want to use perspective, and it will correct the perspective over multiple frames as well. You've also got auto crop, which will pull an auto crop in at the minimum value of that crop factor, and then you can press the merge, and again push it back into the background, creates me a raw file, and enables me to create a raw panoramic, which I can then go back into later. Now again, this is a raw file, these are real world images, so again it's going to be a 200 meg file, maybe slightly more, depends on the camera that I use to shoot it. It was a 24 megapixel per image camera, so you know I've already got quite a lot of data there. Now that will whir away and work. It should be there in a second. And the next feature I'm going to talk about while it's doing that, oh, actually, it's just done it. So it's actually pretty quick at building that together. And you can see there that there's my panoramic. And now I can go into the development module. And now I can go in and manage the highlights, shadow recovery, again, the white point, the black point, and the clarity. Give me an image that really looks amazing. Now, if we can do HDR, and if we can do HDR, so if we can do HDR, and if we can do panoramics, it will be so nice to do a HDR panoramic. Let me just delete that one for now. So that the idea of a HDR panoramic, which is really hard to do in camera, by the way, because it's really hard to get the gradient filter over the top of the camera in the first place to do panoramics over multiple ranges. It's also very difficult to put them all together. It's also very time consuming. It's also impossible at the current time without Lightroom to make a raw file from that HDR panoramic. So to give you an idea what I'm doing here, I've got 5 sets of images. Each set has got 3 pictures, and each one is a metered point, 1 stop under, 1 stop over. Now each set of images, I've brought through the HDR process. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 HDR images, and at which point I can then select the 5 HDR images and pull the HDR images into Panorama. And what that will do is it will create me a panorama based on those HDR images, again keeping it all raw, so all that raw data comes through. So now I'm getting a huge file that I can work with, and I've got all that tonal range that I can work with as well. So it gives me a way to create very compelling pictures. But don't forget, this is going to be big. So when it's finished, it will end up being about 9,500 pixels. And so that's going to take a little while to kind of build together, which is doing it now. But this is much faster than doing it manually. Now, the other reason for this is when you start dealing with big files and big pixel counts, you're obviously going to have an impact on Lightroom and the amount of pixels it consumes at any point in time. And that's where things usually start slowing down. But now in Lightroom CC and in Lightroom 6, we're now taking advantage of the graphics processor. The graphics processor means now that we've got 2 pipes for processing. We've got the CPU for maths and the GPU for graphics, which means that we're now able to use both those channels to get great performance in using Lightroom. Now the whole of the development module is also on the graphics processor. So it means that anything you're doing now in the development module, even on machines that are 4 years, 5 years old, you're able to fully utilize the graphics cards. Okay, we do have minimum requirements that are available on the website, but we're able to use those graphics cards to actually leverage the performance of Lightroom and to give you as a user better performance and better control of the images. So that's almost done, that panorama, and it's creating a ½ gig panorama, so it's going to be, you know, pretty big, but it will enable me to use that raw elements in my development module to go in and to do that. So I'll just be a second. Here we go, and it will create me a single image next to the other images, and you can see that it just pops up now as we were talking. You can see it pulls a crop in, and there we have the image. If I pull the information over, I'm just going to go to the single view mode, you can see there it's a DNG file, so it's all raw, and it's 9,500 almost 1,000 pixels on the long side, so that's pretty big. So now I can move that across the development mode. Notice the speed at which I can pull it across to develop. Now I'm getting that efficiency of the GPU coming through, the graphics processor. Now I can go in and use my highlights, my shadows, my whites, and my blacks. Now the other benefit of doing this is that Lightroom will keep all that lens information coming through from the camera and from the lens, so I can automatically correct this and automatically orientate. So if I want to pull this through through the lens correction, I can, and I can also do automatic. Now this brings me on to something quite interesting. This actually was taken using a Fuji X-T1. Now, if you're using a Fuji or using a compact system camera like a Panasonic or other like Samsung's, for example, you may not find your lens camera calibration inside the profile corrections. That's because you don't need to do. What happens on those cameras, they're very intelligent. They contain software in both the lens and inside the body. And what happens is that lens profile is sent automatically through into Lightroom through its import and metadata capture, which allows us to automatically apply that to the image so you don't have to do. And the reason we don't do that for the other cameras like the Canons and the Nikons is because we provide that for you as an added benefit. It's not coming from the manufacturer, so we can't add it, and we don't like adding that. So that's the reason, that's why you've got a disparity. If I just come out of there for a second and just zoom in, again, you can see the performance benefits of the GPU. You can see how far I'm zooming into this picture. I'm zooming in, you know, quite a long way at 1:1. It's 9,500 pixels, and you can see there that I'm actually moving without any lag, and I'm getting all of my data from that HDR. So really, you know, for me, HDR panoramics are the key winner when it comes to Lightroom CC. Now, one of the things I want to talk about really quickly is face recognition. Face recognition is important for me and important for other photographers as well, because it means you can start cataloging your pictures based upon who's in them. So I'll synchronize this folder quickly, and you'll see I've got a few pictures going to come through. And some of those pictures are in the face recognition. So you can see as I bring them through, they're going to have faces in, and I'm going to go to the face module. And the face module will automatically try and find images that are coming through. Now, I just want to see what's happened there. So what it's doing now is looking for pictures inside the film strip, and you can see there on the import, and if I look at over here what's happening, it's indexing the pictures as it's coming in, and you can do that set up on the Lightroom catalog settings to have automatically detect faces in photographs. You can turn that off, of course, if you want to do, but it's not having an impact on the process of Lightroom if it's all done as part of the import. Now you can see there that it's found pictures of me and of my co-worker Rupert. I can very quickly say, yes, that is me, that is Rupert, that is Laura. Okay, I can change them if I like to as well. That is Frank, one of my buddies, my photo buddies. And you can see here that I've got myself here as well in a group picture, and also Jane as well. But unfortunately, Tim's not. Mark is. If I go to click on the picture, double click, it shows me that I've got some missing people, i.e. just this one, and I can type in Tim. And what it will do is add me. I can also use my manual adding as well, and I can actually add in David, who people may know as David Stanbury, and you can have in tagged as well. And what we're doing there is we're going to add them into the keywording. So now you can see we've got Jane, Mark, Richard, Tom, and Dave all in the keywording. So I can find those pictures very, very quickly, very, very easily. Anything that I don't like, I can say Tim's there. If I don't like, I can say no, it's not. And what Lightroom will do is it will learn and it will look at my images on the next import and try and match them up based upon the knowledge it has from previous imports. Pretty nice. Now, I just want to go into Lightroom Mobile very quickly. Lightroom Mobile is enabled using the Preferences panel in Lightroom, and you can turn that on by signing in to Lightroom Mobile. By the way, as an aside, the performance for GPU is enabled using the Performance tab over here in Lightroom as well. You can turn it on and turn it off. Depends on your processor. You may need to fiddle with that a little bit, wrangle with that. Okay, I've logged into my Lightroom Mobile. Now, it so happens that my pictures that I want to publish on my Lightroom Mobile on my iPad have actually all been tagged in my Lightroom Mobile collection. So Lightroom Mobile works on collections, and to do that I can just put them into that collection and then click the synchronize button, and what it will do, and you can see at the top here, is Lightroom will automatically start synchronizing with Lightroom Mobile. Now, I'm just going to go in and show you Lightroom Mobile quickly. If you haven't used it, it's definitely worthwhile having a look at. It just allows you to work on your pictures on the go. You do need to have a wireless connection, but it does mean that you can work on your pictures. Now, one of the beauties of using Lightroom Mobile is that we're going to send your raw data in the form of a very small smart preview to the iPad. So it means it doesn't matter how big your file is, we will compress it to about 40 times, and we will then, it's just logged me out for some reason, we'll compress it to about 40 times, and then we will be able to represent that on the iPad. Now, that's really advantageous when you have big cameras, and the way that cameras are moving and camera manufacturers are moving now, the file size are getting bigger. It's actually the data that you get with Lightroom Mobile and Creative Cloud is the Lightroom Mobile data is actually free. You don't pay for that. It doesn't impact on any of your Creative Cloud Alliance. And actually, there's unlimited storage there as well. So it will depend on how much storage you have left on your iPad or your iPhone, or even now your Android tablet, because we now support Android tablets as part of Lightroom CC, or Android phone. And you can see here that my pictures come through, and I can make a very quick edit on my pictures. I'm not changing color, so you don't have to worry about any color profiling or any kind of calibration for the iPad. You can just edit your pictures and work on the highlights and shadows, and maybe any kind of effects that you might want to work on. But you can see befores and afters, you can slideshow, you can preview, and you can even present. Now, one thing I do want to show is, before we do that, is a new app called Adobe Slate. And Adobe Slate is a great way to show stories that you can build on your iPad. Now, I built one from this story of the day, and the idea here is that you get the application, you've got ideas that you can build, but inside projects, you've got, in this example, the Fire Balloon Festival project, and this is just like a kind of a continuous streaming project. I put text in here by using a text word processor, just type my text in, and then I put my pictures in to give me some context and headings and that type of thing. And the idea is that I can go in, I might want to change something, so I can click on the little plus, which allows me to put photographs, text, links, and photo grids in there. But if I go down to the photo grids, you'll see that I have now a collection of photographs that I can now click on and edit. The beauty of this is that all that content is now coming from Creative Cloud and also from Lightroom Mobile, and that Lightroom Mobile collection I synchronized from Lightroom. So now I can go into my fire balloon story, and I can actually add in a picture into the grid, and I can actually move things around to make sure it fits within the story that I want to tell. And when I've finished, I can then come back and carry on editing. So it's quite seamless, really smooth. Once I've finished my edit, I can then push this out to the web and socialize it. Push it out as a clipboard with a URL, or I can send someone with a mail or Twitter or Facebook, or even copy the embedded URL and have this appear on a blog. So lots of different options there for publishing your work and your content. So that's pretty much what I want to show you as part of that. So hopefully you found something there that was interesting and useful to your photography. And before Richard comes on, I just want to give a handoff slide to give you more information about where you can find me moving forward. And you can find me on my blog, but you can also find me at Twitter. We've got loads of content on Photoshop and Lightroom, on YouTube, and you can also get the trial from the bit.ly code provided. So I'll hand you now back to Richard, who's going to talk about color management and the Datacolor solution, which is pretty awesome. Thanks,
Crikey. Rich. Thanks, Rich. That's great, mate. Well done. That was a heck of a lot in a short period of time there, but thank you kindly. I have to say, I mean, I've been having a play today with the latest version of Lightroom there, and the panoramics fantastic. Really is tremendous the way it's allowing you to work on those images and just knit them together now. I mean, before I was doing probably the same as a lot of other people, coming out of Lightroom, going into Photoshop, using automate action, etc., etc. It's just seamless now. So much quicker.
It's amazing, isn't it?
And you don't get, I mean, I've got some powerful kit here as far as hardware is concerned, and you don't get, you know, when I was doing it before, I'd be getting the fans whirring because it was obviously trying to, you know, it was burning some calories as far as the CPUs and the graphics card are concerned. But now, with that move onto the graphics card doing a lot more of the processing there, it's fantastic. So, and another good one, the HDR side of things. I mean, I've used a lot of HDR solutions over the years. The HDR side of things is excellent. I mean, and the de-ghosting as far as that's concerned is superb as well. So yeah, kudos there, mate. Very, very good release there, and there's loads of good stuff in there. But anyway, I'm quickly going to take you through, folks, through two key things that Richard mentioned or alluded to in his session. Firstly, we're going to talk about a new release. So Richard's had his new releases there of Lightroom CC, Lightroom 6, and we've had the joys of Slate there we've been having a look at. But what we're going to have a look at from our side of things, on the Datacolor side of things, we've had the launch of Spider 5 in the last couple of weeks. Now, for those of you who perhaps haven't quite appreciated what color management is yet, Richard definitely you know, described it very well earlier on. Essentially, what we're worried about is not being able to trust when you're retouching, when you're doing all that great stuff that Richard was doing there. If you're not calibrated, if your screens aren't calibrated, if your devices aren't calibrated, then basically you can't trust what you're seeing. So therefore, that's where you need to get some sort of device to calibrate your screens. And of course, the issue here is the more types of devices we use, the more types of or different manufacturers of devices we use, then the more we could have differences between our different screens on our different machines. And of course, if we're trying to then print out those images, we also need to be calibrated all the way through, so that you can see on screen and soft proof on screen. Another great feature within Lightroom is the soft proofing. So be able to soft proof on screen how those images are going to come out at the back end of your workflow process. So key thing here, loads of different types of screens and devices. All of them age as well over time, and even between one, two, or three different screens made by the same people, they change over time basically, and they can be different due to different manufacturing processes. So we need some means of actually calibrating those, of correcting those into a standard. The standard is the International Color Consortium standard, and the tool for choice of doing this is the Spider. And now, as I said, the Spider 5's come out. It's able to do, and we've re-engineered it to handle a lot more future-proofing, so things like curved screens, TV screens, and you know, we're now into the realms of being able to handle 4K, 5K screens and projectors and so on. So therefore, really trying to set you up with a future-proof device here. Very simple the way it works. You don't have to do the complex putting profiles in places that you had to do in the past with screen calibration. Basically, it's very simple to use, Mac or PC based, runs on laptops, on desktop computers, you name it, iMacs in particular. The latest iteration is taken up from where the Spider 4 had left off, and being Spider 4 basically was unique pretty much in being approved to be recommended to be used on iMacs, because iMacs in particular have quite a large glass bezel at the front of the screen can cause a lot of refraction in there. So straight away the 4 had been able to calibrate those. Now what we've done with the 5, we've raised the gamut again, raised the standard again, and getting so much more out of even older displays and less quality displays. But essentially, it's a very simple process. You've effectively got a spider, which is a USB-based device. It's got a bunch of sensors in there and filters, and it works with software that comes with the spider. In fact, you download it nowadays, so you don't actually get a disk with the spider. You just download the software from the website. Once you register your device, it always is up to date as far as that's concerned. And as you saw there, it just runs a bunch of colors, a selection of colors, not quite the few that it showed there. It takes about 5 minutes the first time round, and for some of the Pro and the Elite versions of the new Spider 5, it takes about 2.5 minutes for a recalibration. But it automatically applies that profile, as it's called, this correction factor to your machine to change or to correct your screens and your viewing devices into the international standard that everybody else, any other hardware manufacturer, software manufacturer, or operating system manufacturer in the graphics business essentially uses. So therefore, once you've calibrated your machine, you're good to go. You can see the same colors that other people on calibrated machines have got within your gamut. So key thing though is these things do change. One of my laptops I had last year lost about 5% of its color gamut over 5 months. So essentially, if I hadn't been calibrating, in my case on a weekly basis, I wouldn't have known what was going on. I wouldn't have the opportunity to go back to, in this case, the manufacturer and say, hello, please can you swap this out because it's obviously faulty. You need to check these things. More importantly, you just need to make sure you're kept calibrated. Don't do it once and then trust that that's going to be the same for the rest of time, because it won't. So what have we done very briefly? Well, we've redesigned the physical device. We're bringing you now a much more robust spider, basically, much more robust calibrator. As I say, it's a USB-based device. It's got a lens cover on it now, which is also acting as the counterbalance on the USB cable there. So you use that to counterbalance such that the spider itself hangs in the right place on your screens. And also, of course, it protects the sensors on the spider, because the sensors have now been improved, they've been encapsulated to make it more robust, because we see a lot of people using their calibration devices on the move nowadays, going to different venues, events, studios, etc., with laptops and so on. And of course, every time you change a lighting condition, a lighting environment, you need to recalibrate, because it will have an effect on how you are seeing and perceiving those colors and how those colors are being displayed. Good thing, we've done some big things as far as improving the honeycomb, something we learnt with the Spider 4, and was the reason why we were so capable of calibrating iMacs with the Spider 4. But we've now raised that honeycomb environment there. You can see it on the left-hand side here. Hopefully you can see my cursor moving around. This honeycomb is what's focusing the light through on the sensor array, basically. And that's exactly what's giving us up to 55% improvement in the quality of the calibration on older displays and on less high quality displays. Now, for those of you who want a really high quality display, you'll see later on, actually, Wex are running a bit of a special on ISO displays, so we'll keep your eyes open for that later on. We'll be giving you some details on prices and so on later on. Key thing with this is, okay, great, we've got a superb device that is now more robust for using on the go out in the field. It's much more protected, and it's also going to give you far better results, and even on older equipment. So it's probably going to give you much more life out of existing equipment nowadays as well. A couple of other things we've done in there, we've also put in a tripod mount into the Spider. So actually now it's capable of calibrating large TVs, or for instance front projection or rear projection projectors, because you can just position it in the right position on a tripod. So therefore, great way of working as far as that's concerned. And that redesign to make it slightly more rounded in its approach and less concave means that it's actually already there, ready for using with curved screens and perhaps any other flexible screens that are coming through. So that's the Spider 5. Comes in 3 different flavors. The choice is yours, basically. Express is more at the hobbyist end, Pro in the more for pro photographer end, and the Elite is for people running studios. But basically, the Express now is raised up. It's coming in. Wax are selling at £97, which is a very good price online there. But basically, it's coming in at an area where the Pro previously in the Spider 4 range was featuring, i.e., we've now enabled the Spider 5 Express to be able to calibrate multiple displays on the same machine. Before it couldn't, it could only do one display. So if you're using a laptop, for instance, it would calibrate your laptop display. Well, now it can calibrate multiple displays on the same screen. So it's definitely coming into that more professional end, albeit it still doesn't have the same level of controls of gamma and different white points that you can with the Pro, or for that matter, the Elite. Pro, pretty much the photographer's favorite, the professional or semi-professional photographer's favorite. Gives you a lot of things that the Express can't do at the moment, like things like the ambient light sensor to check the lighting conditions you're in. But the Elite, top of the range one, allows you to do multi-point sensing, basically. So great for working with displays where you want to look for hotspots, because unfortunately LED and LCD displays have that propensity to have hotspots, i.e. areas of brighter pixels than others, and that's exactly what it's going to highlight for you there, as well as being able to force multiple displays to adopt the same profile. So that's very relevant if you are running a studio with multiple workers working on the same production. Basically, you can force all of the displays to focus on the same, basically spider tune, as we call it, to tune onto the same profile. So key thing there is when you've got nice displays like ISOs, which can show pretty much 98%, if not more, of Adobe RGB, which is a third bigger than sRGB. You really want to get the most out of it. So therefore, if you've got multiple ISOs, obviously you can use the Elite to focus those together to actually get those absolutely spot on together as far as their calibration is concerned. If you're working in a mixed environment of older machines, well, then you can also use the same solution to get all those older machines looking the same. Of course, the trouble is that they will level out to the lowest common denominator if you're not careful. So that's the Spider Pro, the 145 pound mark, and the Spider Elite at 207. They're the higher end options, basically, as you can see from the pricing. But as mentioned, if you are interested in a new display as well, there's up to a £215 savings. So you can save more than the cost of the Spider Elite on the ISO color edge displays tonight, or at the moment, basically, by going to Wex's website. So we highly encourage you to do that. Get on there and improve your imaging, folks. Now, one thing I'm quickly going to cover. It's part of our capture range of solutions. We've not got time to talk about all of it tonight. Richard mentioned about grey cards earlier on. So the Spider Cube, for instance, is our cubic and more portable, more robust version of a grey card. But the Spider Checker is the device in the middle there. I'm going to just quickly focus on that because it solves a key problem for anybody who's doing events photography or sports photography or fashion photography or studio photography, where you need to get the colors absolutely spot on. You may recall from that picture of the log where the color shift happened there because the colors that Richard was seeing as captured weren't correct. There was an effect happening there due to the lighting conditions and so on. But what we can do is we can use the Spider Checker, which is a multi-patch color card, to correct, and not only correct, but also linearize. So where we've got, for instance, the sort of situation in weddings where you've got the same subjects, i.e. the bride and groom, in different lighting conditions, in the church, in the reception, outside, and that's making it look like a hodgepodge of different colors. Well, we can level that out straight away using the Spider Checker, and as Richard showed you very briefly, it creates a preset within Lightroom, so it works synergistically with Lightroom and basically gives you the capability of instantly correcting batches of photographs, because of course that's what Lightroom is absolutely superb for doing, basically one of the many things. So what does it look like? Well, it looks exactly like that. That's one of the young ladies holding one of our Spider Checkers there. It's actually a clamshell device, so it actually folds down the middle there. It snaps shut, basically. It's a solid case it's in, so therefore very robust again, so great for carrying around your bag and not have to worry about it getting mucked up and degraded over time, basically. It's even got a fade checker in there to check if things are fading as well, so you can always replace the cards that are in there as well. Key thing is, what we're trying to do here is get you to a situation where it's correcting the colors, basically. So rather than show you in slides, I'm going to quickly pop out of here and pop into Lightroom just to show you the sort of situation. Now, I apologize, these are going to be my photos as opposed to anybody professional with a camera, but albeit as much as I'm lousy at taking photographs, I can at least capture some shots of the same people, in this case my nephews, in different lighting conditions, basically. So what you're seeing here is exactly as described. You know, the same guys, same subjects, looking washed out in some shots, overly red in others. You know, still taken badly because I can't correct the focus in here, and I can't correct people having their eyes closed, but perhaps we can actually with other solutions within Photoshop. But basically here, what we're going to do is we're going to calibrate. We're going to shoot that card, that spider checker, in each lighting condition. It doesn't have to be at the time of the event, can be before or after, but as long as you capture it in the same lighting conditions, you can create a preset for each of those situations, and therefore you can use that to linearize, to instantly correct the colors at capture. So what we've done here, we've done exactly that. We've shot it. Now you may notice that it was quite a large card. Now the idea here is if we're going to be shooting this card, we need it to be in the same area as the photograph we're taking. So if we're taking group scene, we need to have the same capture. So you need to be focused on the same capture area as the actual photographs are going to be, or roughly. So essentially, it's no good using, there are some sort of small color cards out there. It needs to be a substantial size, such that A, you can tripod mount this because it's in a hard case, so that's great. Pop it in there before the subjects arrive, shoot it, but make sure you are capturing that whole area because you want the camera to be metering for the whole area. You don't want to be just metering for the card itself. But then what we're going to do is we're going to shoot it and shoot the same target in multiple different lighting conditions, and we're then going to go in and basically crop them down. So I've already cropped these versions down here. So I've got this cropped version down here. Just turn off my information on window there. And we do three simple things. We first of all go and check our exposures. So first of all, this square at the top here, this is a 96% white. If we look under the histogram, we can see it saying 96.8, 96.8, 96.9, just on the right-hand side there. Well, we're going to just take that exposure down just a little bit, perhaps just to drop that down a little bit. Probably gone a bit too far there, but you get the gist. We just need to get down to about 96, right? That'll do. We also need to get our blacks. This is the only other value we need to worry about, our blacks. We're going to set our exposure and our contrast, i.e. our shadow end, correctly, because we've got these values we can shoot for. This is about 4% down here, so sorry, it is a 4% tile, and we're reading somewhere around 4%. If it isn't correct, we'd use the black slider just to adjust that slightly, and then get it up to, you know, that'll do. We'll say that that's near as damn it. The next thing we're going to do, we're just going to quickly, well, actually, we should have done this first. Apologies, folks, but we're going to quickly set the white balance using our white balance tool. So, white balance, exposure, shadow end, just to get those values, those parameters correct. That's all we have to do, because now we've got a plug-in for Lightroom, which is not there. Where is it? There we are. And then basically, let's open that up in the Spider Checker app, basically. And what that's doing is it's going to quickly give us the opportunity to compare all those 48 squares with what I'm waving around now. This is the actual known values of those, that's the image behind it, that's the cropped image behind it. So I'm just going to move over the sample points. So each one of these small squares is going to read the color behind it. Instantly, just by hitting the save calibration, it's going to read every one of those 48 points straight away and create a color calibration, a color correction, which will then be input into Lightroom. And you can then go ahead and basically calibrate away. You can correct all your images. So basically, what we're going to do is quickly give it a name. We're going to call that Cal 3 and click on OK. So just by doing that, we'll have created a new Cal over here. Where actually, in Lightroom, we do need to quit and then restart in order to bring that in, but we've already created one earlier on, is Cal 3, so that's just going to give us a correction to that calibration, basically. But let's see, more to the point, the proof of the pudding in these images. So what we've done, by creating a preset in this area of Lightroom, we can actually drag these presets into a into a folder, basically. So I pop the relevant presets for this particular photo shoot into a folder already over here. What we're going to do therefore is just say, okay, well, this shot was in the church. Let's correct that. Boom. And let's have a look at these shots outside the church. So suddenly we're seeing the colours being corrected. So there's our outside the church, there's the outside the church. So the colours being corrected, exposures are being set correctly. We can now see this is a pink tie here, this is a grey tie on these two. So basically getting that opportunity to correct the different lighting conditions instantly, and not just correct them, but get them linearized as well. So we're getting the colors absolutely spot on, but then basically he's still got his eyes open, eyes closed on the right hand side there, but as we go between the different lighting conditions now, we don't have that hodgepodge of different versions of skin tone, color of jacket, color of tie, color of you name it. It's spot on, it's correct basically, and we've linearized out. So that was very briefly giving you a tour of the spider checker there. We're just going to quickly go into just tell you a little bit more about the spider checker. So let's just pop into here and say, okay, there it is. It's, as I say, clamshell-based device. You can see it in the top left-hand side here, actually tripod mounted, because that's one of the advantages of the spider checker. As mentioned, it works in Camera Raw, or within Photoshop and Camera Raw, and within Lightroom. It's a solid design, which makes sure that it's robust. You can see it actually shut down the bottom here, so it's about the same size as a tablet computer, basically. It also has a fade checker, which allows you to know over time whether your charts have faded. I mean, I have to say, mine hasn't faded in 3 years, but if you were working perhaps in the middle of the Sahara every day, leaving it open, perhaps it would. If it does, then you can always change these cards. Basically, so you've got two separate cards in there, one on the right-hand side more for skin tones, one on the left-hand side for generic colors, and also on the back of those you can flip them over and use it as a large grey card as well. So great device. Also has to be said, the one of the cards there is actually used within various different video softwares for video calibration as well, and of course having a large grey card is great for video calibration as well. However, folks, once again, our friends at Wex are offering a very good price at the moment online. So if you check out the store, it's normally about £135 list price, and it's £110 from Wex at the moment. So thank you kindly to the guys and girls at Wex there. So I'm going to wrap up now and give you the opportunity in a few seconds to start typing in your questions on for either Richard or myself, and I'll quickly draw your attention to the fact that we have a free ebook. So if you do want to find out more about, in particular, color management, but you want to get tips on how to, for instance, look at color profiles, etc., and maybe profiling images for print, then by all means download this ebook. This is the URL at the bottom there is for the English version. There are obviously other language versions as well. Also come back to our webinars as well. We do run regular webinars, and no doubt we'll be doing some more with Wex, and we'll perhaps look at one specifically on print as well. We've got a whole bunch of sort of snippet YouTube videos as well, so you can go there and see more about our product ranges, things like the lens calibration and spider print for print calibration there. But if you have any questions that we don't manage to get to answered tonight, then please give a call to our free phone line. There is a European free phone line, so that's hence the 2 zeros at the start of the number, 00800 700 870, or drop a line via our ticketing system via our website. There's the URL there, so http://support.datacolor.com. That's it, folks. We've rattled through a lot of information tonight. I hope it's been worthwhile. I hope if you've got some questions, please ask them now. It doesn't matter how silly. If they are silly, we won't necessarily ask or read them out aloud. We'll just answer you privately. We can do that. So just put private at the start of your question as you type it in. But I'm going to say thank you very much for your time. And at this point, I'm going to hand back to